Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Red Tinted Glasses podcast. Well, we thought things couldn't get any worse. In the words of Mick McCarthy, it can. Phil, welcome back to the show. Hope you're doing well.
Yeah,
Have we got rock bottom?
it certainly feels like it, but yeah, I'm hoping my return coincides with an uplift in form, but I'm not confident in the slightest that that's going to be the case.
No, not in the slightest. Callum, you were absolutely fuming in our group chat last night, less than 24 hours on. Calm down a little bit.
I have calmed down a little bit. I was incensed, I think is maybe the best word to describe it at the time. And looking at the performance, still fuming. I've watched back the goals as well, and oh my goodness, they're horrendous. But I am a lot calmer. Hopefully, a bit more of a level-headed approach rather than how it would have been if we'd done a full-time reaction. And I'm sure probably Phil would agree with that as well.
Yeah, there was a fair head loss in the stands for me as well, so I don't think anyone would have enjoyed that.
Well, it was very tempting to do a live reaction, but of course, both of you were at the game. And Callum, I know you pointed out there that you watched the goals back. For, of course, those that watched on Red TV, I think probably summing up where we are right now, the fact that Red TV cut its feed when Dolcek scored, and also similarly at the second, I ended up spending the second half watching Dundee United's TV, which has got ads like placed all over it. So that was a little bit annoying. But I mean, I don't know what was more annoying, probably the performance as well. Let's start with the team news because there's a bit to digest out of that as well. Sivert Nielsen returning to the starting lineup, I guess, was really felt predictable. Topi Keskinen given a rest and Nicholas Milanovic coming back in, but it was probably more those that didn't feature Marko Lazetic involved with the B side in their defeat at Forfar, and Leighton Clarkson rested ahead of the game against Motherwell this weekend. And given Leighton's not been starting, that decision felt extremely peculiar. Which one of you want to come in first on the team news? Callum, straight off the mark. He's definitely got lots to say.
First of all, I was actually quite happy with the starting 11. I thought Paul Vara's in from the start. That's good. Milanovic is in. And, you know, Nicky Devlin wasn't playing at left back, so I was pretty happy about that as well. But you're certainly right to mention the sort of exclusions as well. I've wrote in my notes, Clarkson rested. Just why? As we said, he's not been really starting games. That seems certainly very, very peculiar. I don't know what he could do. What's happened for him to warrant a rest? You know, and I get he's maybe a new dad. Maybe that has an impact on things. I guess it's genuinely the only thing I can think of. But having him and Nicky Devlin and Lazetic not in the squad, I felt, looking at that, I feel like, certainly in hindsight, would it not have been useful to have those guys on the bench, at least, you know, if things went tits up like they did, to perhaps call on? Not that, you know, it would have made much of a difference, I imagine, but certainly very, very odd that the two of them, Devlin and Lazetic, punted to Forfar instead.
Yeah, as Lewis points out, Devlin was actually still suspended last night, and Callum Brown on comms on Red TV indicated that it was actually a 3-match ban, so he will in turn be suspended for this weekend. And that was his belief, which is staggering that got turned into that. But I was with you, Callum, as well. I actually did think, you know, fairly happy with the starting lineup. You know, as I said, I'd fully accepted in another group chat that Nielsen would come in. Happy to see Dante given a chance, but Jesus Christ, suffering from the Shade and Morris effect. Better off the bench than he is starting. But again, yeah, questions for me was where was Lazetic and Clarkson? I just don't understand the reasoning. And again, these are small details that are going to be held against the manager, because of course it's the manager that currently is coming under scrutiny, but of course I still want to hold some of the players to accountability. But Phil as well, probably another surprise on top of that is the fact that Graham Shinney maybe didn't get any minutes last night as well.
Yeah, I mean, kind of agree with both of you in the sense of on paper the lineup I think most people were quite fine with. Maybe a few people wanting a slight, change formation, 2 up top or whatever they fancy. But yeah, a bit like you, I was surprised even at, as the game went on, there was no shinny. I think that midfield was missing a bit of bite, and especially towards the end, it was extremely unbalanced. Okay, we were chasing a goal and throwing as much attacking players on as we could, but at one point when your pivot players Adil Ashish, it just is so strange. I mean, the changes in general were just strange, but we'll no doubt come to speak to that later on.
How did you both feel that we started the game in respect last night?
I thought the first sort of 10 minutes weren't too bad. I kind of thought we were going to come out and have a real case of the jitters, and just really look, miles off the pace. But I thought we looked all right. I didn't expect us to get up the pitch and, score a quick fire, perfectly worked goal, just on current form. But I thought the way we held the ball was quite good. There were some flashes of just needing the right ball to be played. I mean, Carlson must have had the most frustrating first sort of 20 minutes, the amount of times that you seemed to get in behind the United defence and nobody picked their head up. But no, I thought we started off quite well. The odd sort of scare at the back from Alfie Dorrington, but personally I thought we were all right, looked comfortable enough.
Yeah, I don't know, Callum, your thoughts, but some of what Phil said, it'll be interesting because obviously both of you being at the game will have had a different perspective than myself watching at home. And I thought a lot of our good play in that first 45 was going through Stuart Armstrong. As Phil mentions, there was definitely one opportunity where Armstrong underhit the pass to Carlson, and yeah, he wasn't getting picked out. Again, Alfie Dorrington, a player that came in for criticism. I certainly remember in that first half when he made a clearance, tried to hoof up the park, and it batters Alexander Jensen, and we get pinned in our own half. But yeah, what was your thoughts on the opening exchanges?
Yeah, much and such the same. I didn't expect us to come out and, as Phil said, sort of all guns blazing, rip-roaring, incredible attacking football, because we've not seen that for bloody ages. But I thought, it wasn't a disaster, which I guess that's a good thing on the basis of things. But it still, a lot of it is so slow and like not crisp enough, not sharp enough, not firing in, as you mentioned, like with the Armstrong ball just under hitting it to Carlson. Sorry, the amazing Stuart Armstrong, not quite getting it across to Carlson in time. But it wasn't. I didn't think it was necessarily bad. It was just once sort of eventually that goal came, it was just sort of, here we go again. It did feel, I was going to say a little bit better, but it wasn't a little bit better. It just wasn't awful. It wasn't awful, and that's honestly about the best thing I can say about the whole game.
The thing is as well, it's once again we just have a 5-10 minute spell in each half where we show glimpses and we threaten the edge of the box. And Phil, I know one of your pet hates is nobody taking a pop shot from the edge of the box. And once again, for the opening 15-20 minutes where I thought we were holding our own, as embarrassing as that feels to say, we hadn't conceded a silly goal as much as United were exploiting the space, in behind both fullbacks every time they were caught high up the pitch. But we were dancing around the edge of the United box trying to find that perfect pass, or then pass backwards and to one of the centre backs just to hoof a ball high to Nisbet to hopefully knock down. You see then, yes, where Carlson take on a shot from the edge of the box, it swirls a little bit, the keeper has to make a save, it goes out for a corner. Why are we not having that enthusiasm or adventure to actually try and test the keeper? And you never know what will happen.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't quite understand it, because admittedly the only sort of bits I've seen of the United goalkeeper was in their flurry in Europe, and he didn't look the most assured, to put it mildly. And I couldn't understand, when we've now added this quality of Jesper Carlson, who clearly likes a shot from goal. We've got Stuart Armstrong on the pitch. We've got Dante Polvara. I don't know why we weren't just trying to take on more from outside the box. But like you say, I think everything was just so passive and so slow, and just nothing had any penetration. I think that was the real issue for me. Even when Gyamfi looked like he was going to, get the burners on a little bit and go down the line, he would then just turn and play it back to Mats Knister, and you just kind of are sat there scratching your head thinking, what is the point? It's exactly how Jim Goodwin wants any side that plays him to play, allows him to sit in and play on the counter, and we just played entirely in his hands. And I think that was probably for me what frustrated me the most, is you've got a lot of experienced and good quality footballers on the pitch, and nobody just took the accountability to change it on the fly, change it on the ground. I saw a good clip the other day of John Terry speaking about, Chelsea were trying to play out the back all the time, and him and Petr Cech just, took it upon themselves to punt up to Drogba because they knew that John Terry wasn't a ball playing centre half. So I don't quite know why nobody's reacting to what's going on around them.
Mm. But unfortunately, yesterday when we were punting the ball up, Kevin Nisbet was maybe winning the ball, but Dante was just admiring kind of what Kevin Nisbet was doing. There was no reaction there. Callum, can see you visibly wanting to jump in, especially on the Carlson and the quality. What's on your mind now?
When you mentioned the quality of Jesper Karlsson, for me, he's a fancy Jeppe, of course. I hate to say it. He's busy. I'll give him that. He's busy. He looks like he's going to do something every time, and then it almost never does. It feels like that's what I felt like last night. And so totally in terms of the ball going long to Nisbet as well. How mental was it? How much we did go long to him though, when he was surrounded by three big Huddy centre backs. And if we're going to go long, why would they not have changed it so Paul Vara's the one going to win the header? When I know, he's not fantastic in the air, but he's got 3 inches or whatever on Kevin Nisbet anyway. And at times he has shown he can be a bit of a target. But instead we're punting it up to Nisbet, who occasionally battles and challenges well, but he's not a big target man. And then even when he does win it, there's nothing else on around him, when maybe Nisbet also would be more likely to have the movement to get on the end of it. All of it is just total garbage. And I totally agree in terms of changing it sort of on the ground as well. There must be instructions coming from the touchline for them to play the way we are. But when it's not working, there has to be some sort of onus, responsibility, especially some of the leaders, the more experienced ones out there, to change it and try something different. Like, surely Jimmy Thelin isn't telling them to just not take a shot on. Surely he's not telling them to do that when the opportunity is there. I know we want to play this nice, attractive, lovely football, but if we're looking for the perfect goal and it's never coming, they're so reluctant to just have a go and cause problems. And as you mentioned, I've not been convinced by the Dundee United goalkeeper either, but how much did we test him? I think 2 shots on target last night, both from Karlsson probably. And we're just so reluctant to take it on and just waiting for the perfect chance. It's baffling. It really is.
And, you speak there about, could you have put Paul Vara in the winning of the header position? Could we not have used Yangi? We saw Nisbet last season work with Dabag. Why couldn't we have used Yangi as a lump up front? I mean, I'm sure from what we've seen of him, limited potentially in terms of capabilities as well, just put him up there as a target man, just to let the ball bounce off his napper and Kevin Nisbet to feed off it, because he can do that successfully. The tactic, whatever it was, wasn't working. And Callum, I'm going to come back to you, because you were speaking about them having the shots from the edge of the box. Your piece for the BBC this week, you spoke about the style where it seems to be the wingers insisting on cutting inside. And once again, I felt that happening last night exposed both Gyamfi and Jensen defensively, which United exploited at ease. And the ease at which they did doesn't just fill me with dread for Motherwell again this weekend, but Shakhtar must have been watching that last night thinking, this is going to be so much fun next week.
Yeah, I mean, we'll probably do bad enough against Masranisi at the weekend, never mind whoever Shakhtar have got. But yeah, like the wingers, come so narrow every single time. And it's not even cutting in necessarily when they have the ball. It's the fact their starting position when we have the ball is they're so narrow. And okay, I get it, they're getting closer to the striker if that's the plan. But when Jensen or Gyamfi have the ball and they're looking ahead of them, they get the ball out wide, they're looking ahead of them, and there's just nothing ahead of them, no movement whatsoever down the line. They can't even just clip it down the line when things aren't going well for us, for the winger to chase, because there's nobody there. So they've got forced to turn back and play into their centre-back or into the centre midfielder, and it just slows everything down, and there's no urgency. And as Phil said as well, it allows teams to get set up, and the Jim Goodwin side especially, and a side that do it really well, they sit in, they deal with whatever you throw at them, and then they'll break on you, and they've got the quality. And as you say, they're then exposed because there's nobody else wide supporting Jensen or whoever defensively, because they're all inside so close to the striker, hiding, you could argue.
Yeah. Phil, you
Yeah.
coming on?
Yeah, I mean, just like Callum says, I think the fact the fullbacks were exposed so much as well. I mean, the first half especially, I don't know where, if this was coming from the game plan or what was going on, but with Carlson and Milanovic, they just sat so tight to the touchline at all times that there was literally no room for them to operate, because the fullback just man-marked them. So they couldn't get the ball into feet. They couldn't get the ball in behind. So it just left, like you say, Jensen and Gyamfi just in this tunnel vision of nothing ahead of them. And it was just so frustrating. And like you say, I mean, the funny thing about when Yangi came on is we played the ball in behind for the majority that went into him, which admittedly is how I think he wants to play. I mean, I said that after the Hearts game, that he looked better with the ball getting played in behind than try to stick it to him as a target man. But it just everything about last night made little to no sense. I mean, even like we say, the changes, like they were effectively like for like changes. Nothing changed the system or gave us any sort of different shape. It was, winger for winger, striker for striker, centre half for centre half. It just all felt so disjointed.
It did. And the other thing that really irked me in that first half, Phil, and I know we were discussing it last night as well, is our inability to play a simple pass. And as much as Jimmy Thelin is going to get probably scolded on this episode, he's been scolded on social media as well, and we'll discuss the manager's future as well, I'm sure. But he can't control Nicholas Milanovic not being able to make a 5-yard pass to an Aberdeen player and in fact pass it straight to a Dundee United player. I mean, it was that bad that a couple of the girls at work today were speaking about, watching the game last night and thinking they could do a better job. That's when I know we're in trouble. Folk that genuinely don't have an interest in football are glancing up at their TV and thinking, that's awful what we're seeing. Jimmy can't control how bad they are once they cross the white line. And it's why I do think some of the players need to take some form of accountability as well.
Yeah, and I think that was the frustrating thing as well, coming off the back of Mitov's STV interview. It looks like we could potentially have 2 interviews that bite us in the back here. Actions speak louder than words. The players have to buck up their ideas. Like you say, there's nothing Jimmy can account for players being unable to do the most basic of stuff. And might add to that as well, it was also telegraphed as well. You knew when it was going to happen, because again, everything was just so obvious. They just make it so easy for teams, and that's the frustrating thing. And then obviously, we'll probably have Jimmy's post-match presser to bite us as well should this run continue. But yeah, just an awful night all over. I try to find positives, but I really am struggling with that one.
Well, it felt like one of the only positives was potentially Stuart Armstrong, and we'll maybe come on to his performance a little bit later on, and when we look at some of the comments Jimmy made at full time. But I would go back to one of the points you made, Callum, in terms of the communication and whether, what communication is the manager doing in terms of message to the players. If this isn't working, go to plan B. A lot of comments last night, again, from those in attendance, was potentially the lack of communication. It's something that's been aimed at Jimmy Thelin previously. Very muted in the dugout. And again, I've seen a lot of comments from those in attendance saying he actually spent most of the second half sat within the dugout, not out barking orders.
Yeah, to be honest, I can't say I was paying attention to the dugout all that much, other than when I was hoping that they were going to make a change, and it didn't seem to come. But interesting, I have seen a lot of people mentioning about a lot of Peter leaving barking the orders as well, which is certainly interesting. And I guess I don't know if it kind of ties in with, to go back to Mitov's interview again, where he's saying like they do get all the information they need to win the game, or they should need to win the game pre-match, and then once they cross the white line, it's their responsibility. I don't know if that's part of it, because as you say, he is often, he's not the most animated, emotional type of figure. He probably feels that he's given them enough, you would think, in order to get something out of the game, and then once they cross the white line, it's up to them. And perhaps maybe we're seeing that, or playing devil's advocate, perhaps he's making a point of that. I don't know, but regardless, you mentioned about a plan B. We've barely got a plan A by the looks of things at the moment, and since we've talked about him already, I actually feel sorry for Dimitar Mitov, to be honest, because he's making saves to keep things respectable, and doing all he can. Okay, sometimes with the ball at his feet, he's not perfect, but he's doing his job as a goalkeeper. And as you say, other than maybe Stuart Armstrong, which I wouldn't say amazing, but Dimitar Mitov, the only other player with pass marks last night for me, and probably pass marks throughout this whole season as a whole so far.
Yeah, there was another save that springs to mind last night, one-on-one situation, which I thought Mitov does really well at. But again, I think, some of the saves he's forced into are coming through our own errors. There was Nielsen giving the ball away cheaply in midfield. While there was the save that he was involved in where somehow Sapsford gets booked for a foul on Nielsen that Stephen McLean plays advantage with, that leads to a very clear opportunity for Dundee United that somehow didn't end up in a goal. But there's a couple of baffling decisions from the referee last night, including the one where they flagged offside in the first half, and we had to take the offside from where the United player touched the ball rather than where he ran from, which was actually just inside our half. And I thought, when Mitov was taking that free kick, there was an opportunity to lump the ball in the box, but he's not going to be able to do that from the bottom corner. But, this isn't all about Stephen McLean and, once again, his poor officiating. There's our problems lie much, much deeper than that. And Phil, again, in terms of confidence and belief around the team, we seem to lack any of that when we concede the first goal. And I thought in terms of the first half, whilst yes, we weren't amazing, we weren't terrible, I didn't think. We were in the game at a venue where most will have written us off. It was just another awful time to concede. I don't actually think it's as bad a goal as people are making out. It's actually a good strike from the edge of the box, which we'd have probably passed back to Dimitar Mitov. Yeah, it goes through bodies, but is probably one thing you could pick up is who's marking him or who's getting out to close the shot.
Yeah, I think that's kind of something we've seen before. We're very slow at closing out to the edge of the box, but I do think the defensive header can maybe be a little bit better. Maybe somewhere else, perhaps. But like you say, can't take it away from them. It was a parlor of a volley. I don't think Mitov was going to be able to stop it. And like I say, just an awful time to concede a goal, especially on our current run. And I don't think, admittedly, everybody is quite frustrated in the support at the moment. I don't think a lot of the reaction throughout the night probably helps that. I'm not going to necessarily say people shouldn't do what they do, but, it's not exactly going to help bolster spirits. Because, Callum will probably attest that the atmosphere inside Tannadice, and especially in the shed, was interesting to say the least throughout the majority of that game.
No, it wasn't good. But I'm not going to blame people for being angry, when it's been 10 months of utter dross for the most part. Scottish Cup win aside, it's been 10 minutes without a draw, and we're still getting served it right now. So I'm not gonna be annoyed at people for that, as long as they're not going over the line, kind of thing. What?
On that, like I totally agree with both your points that people are going to be angry and upset, paying the money, and we're not putting in the performances as you've said for an extended period of time in the Premiership. And although sometimes I do feel there are elements of our sport that are happy to see players make a mistake so they can quickly jump on the back. But where do both of you stand on those that were joining in the sacked in the morning chants?
Embarrassing. Just embarrassing.
Don't sit on the fence, Phil.
Yeah, no, it was just embarrassing. I get that, if you want him out, fair enough, but it's just a bit tragic, isn't it?
The video that's obviously now doing the rounds on social media I'm in agreement with you. It's just fueled the fire of the Glasgow press. I was even listening to Sports Sound, the podcast this morning on the dog walk, and they were going on about the Motherwell manager and how he's the best thing since sliced bread now, and why can't Jimmy get a tune out of the players like Jens is doing. This time last year, it was Jimmy Thelin they were singing his praises of, and he was the best thing since sliced bread. And as you said, Phil, a little bit embarrassing. The man won as the Scottish Cup. I just really don't want, if his tenure is to come to an end at Aberdeen, him to go out in a toxic atmosphere that we're seeing at other stadiums currently in Scotland. He doesn't deserve that.
No, he doesn't. And I think that's exactly it. I mean, so much of what's been good, admittedly, it's maybe been few or far between in recent memory, but what has been good has been the sort of unity and how much everyone's kind of got behind the one common cause. And I think just drifting into this territory, it just regresses us not only on the pitch, but probably a little bit as a club. We've always had a rather fractured and divided fan base as is. And I think it just kind of gets to that point where it kind of gets a bit close to the line for me, and it's just sort of drifts into that kind of tragic territory.
Calm.
I don't see it as big a problem as you two guys, clearly. In a heat of the moment, sort of, we've, again, people have paid their money and travelled and they're disappointed. And I know I can get, it's joining in with them kind of thing, and, it fuels fire to the Glasgow media or whatever. I don't think they really need much more fuel, to be honest, at the state of play, do they? I mean, I know that I guess it's not really helping, but I mean, I don't think it makes that much odds, regardless, because of the state of the play. The fact that there is, Dundee United fans singing that, regardless, they're going to be that's going to be in the media, one way or the other. And what I do think is just like the stark contrast, though, from last season when we were losing games, they were coming over, they were still being serenaded, if you like, and the applause. Whereas yesterday, it was just sort of like, what are we doing here? Just what are we doing here? Like, it's been so long that it's gone on like this, and they've come over and they've drudged over, and they're giving an applause. They don't want to be there, but they feel like they've got to be there, and people are shouting stuff back at them, and it has been terrible. So it's just, I don't know. I'm at a sort of a loss with all of it at this stage. And, I was saying on the way home last night, it would just be much easier if I didn't care. I don't, how much money we could save, how much time we could save, what else could I be doing in my life? But it's unfortunately we all do. And I think it's just gone on for so long that I can't really be, pointing fingers at people when, people, I'm sure many people who have maybe said things, similar, chanting Brobson get to fuck or Goodwin get to fuck, things like that. So what's the difference? I know he's won the Scottish Cup, but I don't want it to get ugly. But at the same time, it's like it's not getting any better. There's no signs of improvement. It's a very difficult one. Is what I'm trying to say. I'm trying to be political and diplomatic. It's difficult. It's tough because people are going to be emotional about these things. They care, and clearly they care more than people who are the players who are out there, as was maybe said / suggested by Jimmy Thelin. So it's difficult.
It's at boiling point now, and I do, maybe the players will be glad that the fans are in the top tier of the stand at Motherwell this weekend, and not extended down to the bottom tier, as certainly those that will have been there during Stephen Glass's tenure remember just how toxic that was, of course, at Motherwell, when the players were having to walk past the fans, of course, during those times as well. You're right, Callum. It'd be easier if we didn't care. We saw the AK Athens away tickets go on sale and sell out within 6 hours today. I know European tickets, certainly away tickets, are a touchy subject for a few of us on this just now. But as Sam Gordon says, it's a life sentence for us supporting this football club, whether we like it or not.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with us caring and having that passion. And as I said to you on the last show as well, and certainly with Andy Skinner as well, I just wish that some of the players would show the passion and that they care just as much as the fans, because again, Motherwell close to selling out, as we've said, AK Athens selling out, Shakhtar looks close to a sellout. The players and the club a lot of time don't deserve the fans and the support that they get, because it's unwavering. And again, that's what Willie Miller said on Sports Sound. By and large, we are a very patient fan base, but when things go wrong, I know, I did think it was a bit strange. We're a patient fan base, but when things go wrong, we're quick to let you know that things are going wrong. And it certainly feels we're at that stage. We're not mad into protests. We've not got Rey Mysterio outside the main stand quite yet with the banners, but we could be a few games away from there. Back to the football though, Callum, because on the pitch, obviously, as I said, going in 1-0 down, conceding at that moment in time, he makes the change. Jack Milne comes on for Alfie Dorrington at half-time, and I think that's fine. Understand potentially injury or putting minutes in Jack's legs ahead of next week, whatever the reason. Just keep it tight, 5-10 minutes, stay in the game. Oh, no.
Of course, we have completely, we've done the complete opposite of that as a result. That's exactly what you think. You think, oh, half-time, maybe he's, put a rocket up their arse, similar to what we saw at like Parkhead last season, let's say, when we came back to draw 2-2, and you saw a totally different side in the second half, and everything changed. No, we decided to do the worst defending of a corner I have seen, I think ever. He's got about an 8-yard radius around him of space to just pick wherever he wants to put it into the back of the net. And you've got Nilsson lying on the floor, waving his arms about like this, giving it all that. Like, he's meant to be this big, strong, mental leader of this team, and he's I've ran into someone or whatever, I've had a little nudge, I'll just lie on the floor. And then the worst part was when he was, it looked like it was just so embarrassing afterwards when he took the ball himself and then thought, it's definitely a foul, I'm putting the ball down and I'll be taking a free kick from here. And then it's not, and he's just in acres and acres of space to head home. But Esselink can, oh God, that about sums things up at the moment. It's just like the easiest set piece goal ever. They'd have been as well not even being in the box. Should have all just stayed up ready to go for centre. What was the point? It was ridiculous.
I mean, if you don't laugh, and that's all I can do in your excellent description of the goal, you'll probably cry. And it was the most surreal concession of a goal. I mean, we've conceded some shocking goals under Jimmy Thelin from set pieces, but this one is definitely up there, to the point where I actually thought the stream had buffered, because how could he be in so much space? And it's not until you watch it from the angle from behind the goal where it is. Look, credit to Dundee United. Jim Goodwin said they'd worked on exploiting Aberdeen's defending at set pieces. They'd worked on it in the training ground. Nielsen's excellently blocked off, to the point where, yes, I could see where he's looking for a foul, but it's so cleverly done in a congested area. But as you said, he channels his inner Kasper Schmeichel with how adamant he was that there was something wrong with the goal. Dante Polvara's marking fresh air. It's just all round embarrassing. And Phil, I've just written down and circled zonal marking. I mean, that goal must have been tearing your newly grown hair out.
It was like you say, it was just an absolute calamity, and it was so strange because the first half I was certain we'd gone a man marking system. Like the first half at the set piece, I was like, "Oh, class, we're man marking. This is good."
Mhm.
Dundee were still getting there or thereabouts because they've got a beloved huge team. But I was like, we're putting pressure on the boy that's winning the ball. Nice. And then for that one, we were in this weird sort of semi-man, semi-zonal setup where you had the three on the runners from the edge of the box. Like you say, Nielsen gets blocked perfectly. It was, good glass-esque, when we had those beautiful set pieces coming in. Callum's impression is spot on. And like say, Povara zonally marking the middle of the box, just absolutely nowhere to be seen. And then to add to the woes of our set pieces, why do we never bloody leave anybody up? Was another gripe that I had, especially at 2-0 down. We still had 10 men in our own box. I don't know what goes on in our training sessions when it comes to set pieces, taking them and defending them. We can't beat the first man. We can't mark a man. We can't leave anybody up. It just doesn't make sense.
It doesn't, and I'm speechless at just how bad it was. Look up free header in the dictionary, and that goal is going to be used as an example. And on the back of that goal, if the confidence was devoid or non-existent, it just got worse because it was wave after wave of United attack. They hit the side netting. Dimitar Mitov pulls off an excellent save low down to his left-hand side as well. I was like, just put us out our misery. I mean, the only good thing was having United on the coupon at 7-4. What a price that was. If we're going to be shit, I might as well make money out of it at this rate. We just really struggle right now, Callum. And, as I said, confidence when we concede the first goal, but let alone concede the second goal. And again, this is where I'm looking back to the players. You've got Nielsen, as you've rightly pointed out, the supposed leader, Mitov, who's told us all it's not good enough. I know he can't do much from between the sticks, but who else is stepping up to try and show a bit of passion?
God, you're so fed up, aren't you, Glenn?
Yeah, apathy is kicking in.
Yeah, I think it took until the triple change until there was a slight bit of like, okay, we're actually going for it now, and there's a bit of a change, and that's probably simply because there was fresh legs. To be honest, like the way I'm so surprised the match still ended 2-0 because, as you mentioned, that wave of pressure after they scored. And Dundee United must have been rubbing their hands together, thinking, "Oh well, yeah, maybe they'll come back at us. Oh, we've got the easiest set piece goal of all time," and then they've just the arse has completely collapsed. And as you say, but for probably some slightly poor finishing and some good stops from Dimitar Mitov, it could have been far more embarrassing. I don't understand. There's nobody, as you say, there's nobody taking that game by the scruff of the neck, and you could say that about God knows how many games in the last 10 months. There's just nobody there taking the responsibility, and the one person who's sort of shown that sort of maybe in the media is Dimitar Mitov, and he's one guy who can't actually do anything really out there on the park, but just try and keep us in the game as much as possible. It is laughable, almost to a degree, how bad it is right now because. And it's summed up by that set piece goal, but there's nobody out there, and maybe Stuart Armstrong is the one who deserves the most credit. They're probably the only midfielder outfield player who I would say it was fine. I don't think he was, as I said, I don't think he was amazing as was said. He was maybe at a push good, certainly the best of an awful bunch, and that's a guy who's played less than 2 games minutes wise of football since April 26th. So what does that say if he's outrunning, outperforming the most creative out of the bunch about the rest of them? The fact he's played 177 minutes between 3 games since joining Aberdeen, and that's the first bits of football he's played since the end of April, and he's the best player on the park for us. What's that say?
That was one of the takeaways I took from Jimmy Thelin post-match comments. And look, again, those that were going to be at Tannadice will have viewed Stuart Armstrong's performance differently to those of us watching on TV. Because, again, the other funny thing about the the watching on TV last night is every time they were showing a replay, even if it was our free kick, by the time it went back to the action, Dundee United suddenly had the ball back. We just never seemed to keep the possession. But going back to those comments on Stuart Armstrong, the fact that Jimmy Thelin highlighted his energy, his passing, and that he wants all the players to hopefully be in line with that enthusiasm and drive says a lot. You know, Jimmy's not really one for throwing players or singling players out and, you know, putting them down. But I felt to a degree there was that first indication last night, Phil, by singling out Stuart Armstrong in those post-match comments.
Yeah, I mean, like you say, I think Armstrong's been brought in obviously as a player for what is quite a young Aberdeen team for the most part, to kind of look towards as that sort of experienced player who's played Champions League football. He's got whatever it is, 50 Scotland caps. He's, you know, played in the Premier League. He's the sort of player you look to for the guidance, for the experience, for, you know, what should have really occurred last night was the player that could grab a game by the scruff of the neck and kind of drag you through it a little bit. And I think that's maybe where the comments are maybe stemming from a little bit as well, to kind of hammer home, you know, that Stuart is there to be the kind of the guiding light messiah in this dire spell. But yeah, a bit like Callum, I don't know if it's just because everyone around him was so bad. He didn't seem to set the world as on fire as, you know, it seemed in the post-match comments. By all means, played well. I would enjoy a team of 11 Panucci Camaras, ideally, if we're going for midfielders on that park. But yeah, a very strange one, I think, like you say, from Jimmy, kind of out with his character.
And in terms of the substitutions last night as well, you mentioned them earlier in the show, Phil. Thoughts on them and the impact or lack of impact that the subs brought?
Yeah, that nobody really did anything. Like I said, it was a bit strange in my opinion, all just effectively being like for like substitutions. Nothing that really would have forced Dundee United in any sort of change of shape or, you know, change of setup in terms of how they were approaching the game. Just kept it all very comfortable. Still the same issues of the ball would go to Yangi and there'd be nobody around him. So it all just felt like a bit of a lost cause and just felt like they came late. You know, as soon as we conceded that second goal, I think something had to have changed. The fact that Adil Ashish was spent what felt like 15 minutes warming up in his full kit after being stood on the sideline for 5 minutes getting ready to come on, just all felt just strange.
And good minutes for Bilalovic last night as well, Callum. I mean, clutching at straws, viewing him as a positive, but I'm sure he'll have enjoyed getting on the pitch and putting in a few decent deliveries.
Yeah, he looked sharp, looks dead fast, which is good, I suppose, because, you know, we sort of lack pace on driving in this side at the moment. But how much between now and Christmas and the busy period we'll see of him, I don't know. But yeah, he looked sharp. As you say, a couple of decent deliveries. One occasion, and I thought, oh, he's doing good. Go on then, take on the shot, and he suffered the same fate as everyone else of just sort of bagging it and turning back and playing it the other way. Which I thought, oh no, we've ruined him already by this stage. But he looked sharp, so that's good, isn't it? And to be honest, some credit to Cassini Yengi. A few decent, you know, sort of layoffs and things like I think leading up to Stuart Armstrong's shot where he hit the bar. He was involved in that, so I'll give him some credit where it's due.
I feel we're really clutching at straws here for credit on the show, but you know, we postponed this game to help us in the Europa League playoff. Didn't work. We've now given ourselves a fixture pile up, if you want, in terms of we're now playing Saturday midweek, and then into Sunday before the international. I mean, I don't think Lazatic would have made much of a difference last night if he wasn't up the road at Forfar, but yeah, questions are going to not just be asked as we've kind of looked towards on the players, and I'll wonder who's going to be put forward for the press over the next couple of days to take accountability. will we see the captain face up to the media instead of Dimitar Mitov? But Callum, Jimmy Thelin said last night, this is rock bottom. Is it rock bottom for you yet? Is the only way up, or can it get worse?
As you meant referenced at the top of the show, it was really his. It can't get worse than this. It can, and it does apply because that wasn't rock bottom last night. If we then go and somehow lose to Motherwell, that'll never happen. Let me think. Oh, we lost to them at home the other day, so it can get worse. We can keep losing. So that it's not rock bottom, is it? If we just go and lose again, and then we get pumped by Shakhtar, and then all of a sudden we've got Dundee, and what if we lose to them as well? It can get worse than this, but at the same time, I guess, can it get worse than losing pretty much every game and not scoring any goals? So maybe there's a point in that. But I thought his comments, at least he showed a tiny bit of fight. I don't know if you guys agree in terms of saying about the commitment that you make when you sign that contract, whether you're a player or staff, and you know how much these fans care, and it sort of suggested that it didn't look like the team sort of had the same care, and I think there was a little bit of fight from him, which I suppose is encouraging because I've last night certainly I was incensed, but I would love simply nothing more than for us to go on and actually just win a game and not have to go through this whole rigmarole of a new manager getting used to his players who he's not signed and he's got to work with. I would so much rather we just stopped being terrible. But after 10 months of being pretty terrible, it's really difficult to see that happening. But by God, I hope it does.
Yeah, you're right. He could have very easily had his own Mick McCarthy moment in that press comments last night, and I'm in total agreement. I would love nothing more for him to have that turnaround and prove a lot of people wrong, including those joining in the chants from the away end last night, and also as you rightly said there, I thought the exact same. He showed a bit of fight. He stopped being humble for a change in his press conferences. He showed that passion and that bit of care that some people maybe say eludes him because he stays so monotone in his approach. And he knows how much this club means to this city and all the fan base as well. And you can tell it's hurting him that the players aren't showing that same pride as we certainly have in our club. And Phil, for you, is it rock bottom yet?
No, much like Callum says, it annoyingly, with the way it's going right now, it feels like one of those interviews that's going to come back and bite us when, inevitably, well, not inevitably, but we potentially get beat by Motherwell. Or at least it feels inevitable under these dire circumstances. But yeah, like I say, it was nice to see him show a little bit of fight and a little bit of passion, off the pitch. If we can maybe translate that into a little bit of fight and passion on the pitch, that would be lovely. But yeah, again, last night just felt like we were still so underprepared, and I think part of that goes beyond Jimmy. It goes to Stephen Gunn and whoever else is involved in our lack of preseason. It goes to how awful our sports science is when it comes to injuries and how unfit we look half the time. So yeah, it's fun times to be a Dons fan.
It is, and there is, I think, a look that needs done, not just at the manager, and of course, with football being a results-based business, the look first and foremost will always fall towards the manager. But I think you're right to highlight the other areas, and for all the praise that Dave Cormack and Alan Burrows deserve in terms of the backing that they've given Jimmy Thelin this summer, there's no arguments around that. And this was a man they wanted before we appointed Barry Robson on a permanent basis as well. The other appointments that Dave Cormack's been responsible for, leave a lot to be desired for. Neil Warnock obviously went out in a blaze of glory during his time at Aberdeen as well. Certain questions would be, do you then trust the next appointment? I don't really want to talk about some of the names linked currently, or no, you don't want to either?
No, God knows they'll just be even more depressing. I do agree, though, in that you say, mentioning would you trust them about appointing the next one because, well, I mean, I think we thought that before Jimmy Thelin, would you trust him? And I suppose in the end it did work out quite nicely for us. But at the same time, right now it's looking like, unfortunately, it's going to end up the same way as the rest of them, albeit with that glorious day at Hampton.
Yeah, and Phil, I suppose coming back to your point about the lack of preparation, which I do, I made that point in an interview with BBC Scotland today that I think, we do have to kind of look at the likes of Dundee United, Motherwell, Hearts, who I know Tyrone Smith mentioned to Jimmy Thelin last night about how can they get a tune out of 13, 14 new players and he can't. They had the competitive games of the Premier Sports Cup to bed in and adjust to. We had 4 very uneventful pre-season friendlies and that was it. And by and large, most of us felt underprepared. So there is an inward look, I think, needing done within the club, not just towards the manager.
Yeah, and I think that's partly the frustrating thing as well, is all of us who are on the outside aren't qualified in any form of football-related, industry stuff, can quite blatantly see how underprepared we are on the pitch, off the pitch, everywhere. And it's just concerning that doesn't seem to come across from those that are in charge. Like you say, we knew since May what the start of our season was going to look like in terms of no Premier Sports Cup and only the one playoff game against Bucharest. So it was kind of on us to organise extra friendlies or extra bounce games or, an added week of fitness training, whatever it was going to be, because we just are second and slow to everything right now. And it almost feels like we'll get there eventually, but we're treating the league season as that stage of preparation, which really shouldn't be the case.
And one thing we were speaking about in our group chat as well, and the comment from Scott M has reminded me of it as well. It's Scott M saying we need a new director of football in before any decisions on the managerial side is made. However, in saying that, he doesn't want Jimmy Thelin sacked. This is it. We've got currently a director of football to hire. I'm sure they will have their opinion on who should be managing the club, or equally, any potential new manager coming in will have their own opinions on what it's like working under, or if they want to do that with a director of football. But we're also, unless I've missed it, where are we in the process of hiring the transition manager? Is that what they were called, from the youth academy up to the first team?
Nowhere. I've not heard anything.
Yeah, I've got no ramblings. I'm hoping we've been interviewing, but I've heard nothing.
We keep advertising big fancy titles behind the scenes, but we don't see any appointments. So, Phil, you want to come in on that in terms of because I know you said that's where you were maybe on the reluctance to see Jimmy go, whilst we don't have a director of football announced.
Yeah, no, I'm exactly with Scott. I mean, I'm not Jimmy out. I'm Jimmy, buck up your bloody ideas, man. Is the camp that I'm in. But no, like I say, I mean, without a director of football and without a manager, you've got no direction, you've got no strategy, you've got no vision. You're, square pegs, round holes, etc. It just would send us on an even bigger downward spiral, in my opinion. And a lot of people have made, whether rightly or wrongly, unless anyone's got some good in the know sort of knowledge there. There's been a lot made of, is Cormac too hands-on with the club? You then verge in even more of that territory if you've got no manager, no director of football. So yeah, I'm very much, if we are going to be making any changes, I think the new director of football's got to be in place.
Yeah, and as I said, a new manager may or may not want to work in that capacity. Callum, on the flip side, obviously some people will say, look, this hasn't been, consigned to this season. This has been really since that 3-3 draw at Easter Road. How realistically much longer can this go on? I think, when we were sat here in April, May, it felt like the Scottish Cup was keeping him in a job. If he didn't win the Scottish Cup, I thought he might be out of a job by October if things didn't improve. I didn't think I'd be sitting here at the end of September thinking he could be out of the job pre-October, having won the Scottish Cup. Not because someone's poached him, but because the bad league form has continued. As Stephen Burns had in the comments as well, the only team we've scored against with 11 men this season is Greenock Morton. People will highlight the amount of wins he's had in the past 40 plus games. Hearts being terrible at the time at Hampden, we scraped past them in extra time. Celtic, of course, we beat them on penalties, so put that into a draw. I think in one of the group chats I was in, out of that 5 wins and however many it is now, we've had 9 draws in there as well. A lot's been documented about our cup opponents being lower league again, which obviously contributes to the wins. So for those of that mindset and very much like it's gone on long enough, let's put him and us out that misery. Where's your opinions on that?
Well, so I did a little bit of counting, and I think it was 11 wins in all competitions since the 23rd of November last year. And as you said, that's including Elgin, Dunfermline, Queen's Park, Morton, and if you include the wins after extra time and on penalties against Hearts and Celtic. Now, of course, they probably should be for their magnitude of the eventual outcome. Yeah, they should be included in those wins because I think he deserves at least that. But as we say, I really hoped winning that Scottish Cup. First of all, best day of my life. So I'll forever be grateful for him for that. But I really hoped that would be a platform of like, okay, we've somehow managed to scrape to 5th. We've now gone and won the Scottish Cup after what was the one of the weirdest seasons ever, the weirdest season of my lifetime, anyway. And then I hoped that would be the platform to build on. Okay, we've got Europe, we can attract players with that, and that'll be a great experience. They should have all felt 10 feet tall after going on to win the Scottish Cup as well. And also, I guess we've mentioned how much potentially care or don't care, seeing what that meant to the city for those who were part of it as well should have made a big difference. But at this point, it is difficult. As I said, I don't want him to be sacked. I just can't see it getting any better, and it almost feels inevitable to me. But that's simply based off the fact that how long this sort of the same malaise has gone on, and it's not really improved, has it? In fact, we're probably worse than we were last season at this point now.
And that's it. There hasn't been any sign of life about the project at this current situation. It kind of feels like when you've been in a long-term relationship and that sexual tension is just completely left right now. There isn't anything that's inspiring us at this moment in time. And I suppose, Phil, as Callum says, it's the fact that we haven't built on the success, whether that be, yes, in the summer, Jimmy was backed, but in terms of our form, there's been nothing to inspire off of the back of that Scottish Cup success, apart from ensuring that every fan somehow got a photo with the cup.
Yeah, it's like Callum says, it really should have been that sort of springboard platform to try and build something really good. I feel like we lost really key pieces to how Jimmy played last season in Pape and Shaden, and we've not really replaced them properly. It's a lot of, like we said before, a lot of project players are maybe being given this weight, like Bilalovic, who did look all right last night, sort of coming on and being thrust in to try and save the game, despite not really having huge masses of first team football at a good level. And it's just, yeah, like you said, it's a results-based business, and I think that's the tough bit to kind of deal with. I think no matter how much I want to say it will come good eventually. Unless it comes good now, it's going to be tough to let it run on.
It is, and then in that sense, then Phil, since you're still off mute, how many games, if things don't improve, does Jimmy Thelin have to save his job?
I think he gets. I think
getting redundant, I suppose that is.
Yeah, I mean, personally, I don't. Not just now, anyway. But I think if the board were going to be making any decisions, it's probably, I would say, Dundee. Depending on how that result goes, you'll get Motherwell, you'll get Shakhtar. Because admittedly, this is one thing where I'm sort of on the fence about a little bit, in the sense of, I was speaking about this last night with the guys I went down with, that it feels very much like Jimmy's tried to build a team for Europe, that's good on the ball and happy with possession and great at recycling and all these great buzzwords that we like to use, but it's just not geared for Scottish football, and it's just such a tough spot to be in.
Yeah, and Callum, your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree. I think it actually probably doesn't. It kind of feels like it doesn't matter what happens in the Motherwell and the Shakhtar games. If we then lose to Dundee, he's gone. If we win, he stays. That's what I think. I don't know what happens if we draw. Don't know, toss of a coin. But I think it kind of feels like it doesn't matter. And just with the position we're in right now, where, yeah, as you say, we don't have a director of football, sporting director, whatever. You can't sack him, then appoint him, and then then appoint someone without that being in place, because of there could be disparity on how they view football, what type of football we should play, whether they're even comfortable in that system of having a sporting director, whatever. It makes it very difficult, and I think that's actually a great point from John Keel. I said it doesn't matter, but what happens if we beat Shakhtar and are still bottom of the league in the international break? That makes it then very difficult, because if we can beat someone of Shakhtar's level and then go and lose the next two league games as well, it makes it very difficult. But I think he's got until the Dundee game to sort of turn it around. I agree. In fact, it's an international break as well. It gives whoever's going to be making the appointment a bit of time as well. But hopefully it doesn't get to that stage and we just start winning games of football, at least showing signs of winning games of football again, because I can't be bothered with it. And it would be nice as well if he can turn it around. After all, he's the man who brought the Scottish Cup back to AB24, so it would be ideal.
Yeah, and I think, as Stephen says, I think even the board can't keep tolerating this. Given the fact there's no wins and no goals, it's the very bottom of where we can be. We are quite literally rooted to the bottom of the table. And I think John's point is quite an interesting caveat, because if he suddenly pulls a win out of his arse against Shakhtar, then where does that leave us? Because we've seen how, I was going to say easy, but the opportunity that lies in terms of qualifying in the Conference League, and certainly a win against Shakhtar would boost those chances, but that seems fanciful at best right now. Do either of you think if we were to lose heavily at the weekend, let's say by 3 goals, that a decision could be made prior to Dundee? Because I'm in agreement with both of you that I think he does have till that Dundee game to find a win in one of the 3 games. I agree with you, Callum. If he pulls a draw out, I don't know where that leaves him. But as you've said, it gives 2 weeks between games. Could that be the timing for a director of football appointment, at least, if not a manager? But yeah, thoughts if it's a heavy defeat this weekend?
Yeah, I think depending on how toxic the response is from that away end, it could well be the end, to be honest, if it's 3 or 4. Even last night, like I say, hearing the sort of sacked in the morning chants, you always kind of think there's not really much of a way back from that. And if you get beat 3 or 4, that's just going to get louder and louder and louder, and I think it'll become a little bit untenable. And knowing Jimmy and kind of what I would like to think that the integrity he's got as a man, I think at that point he would also probably just be like, I'm jacking it in, I'm away, see you later. But yeah, hopefully that's not the case. Like I say, I'm very much Jimmy buck up, not Jimmy buck off is the camp I'm in.
God, how you've been missed, Philip.
Callum, your thoughts if it's a heavy defeat this weekend?
Yeah, that makes it very difficult, given how I agree with how the state of things at the end of the Dundee United match to then, if I don't know, if 3-0. As soon as you said heavy defeat, I was immediately thinking back to Jim Goodwin 6-0 at Easter Road climbing over the Leaf Links. I think if it's a heavy defeat and, the performance again is still leaves so much to be desired, which you would suggest with that scoreline it would, then it automatically makes it a lot more difficult. But I still think the likelihood of changing it before, our first game in the Conference League to be going at that without a manager or with a caretaker manager in charge, I think that's a whole new mess, and then another potentially embarrassing defeat as well on the cards, and then you're probably not got one in time for Dundee either, which even at this stage I still feels a winnable game. But then again, I thought that about Tannadice last night as well, and look how wrong I was.
Yeah, most times, I was going to say we always, but I'll hold myself back. Most of the times we get a result against Dundee when it matters most. But again, I think, depending on the level of toxicity this weekend, and I'm not just speaking about how intoxicated the away support is likely to be, as John Keelo pointed out, Jimmy's family have never moved over to Aberdeen. Can he survive? Is he coping? The whole mental health aspects as well. Without his family and that support network around him, he might have 3 games to save his job. He might have 1 game to save his job. If it is 1 game, surely he has to change formation this weekend, doesn't he? Does he?
I very much feel like it's not the type of thing he would do, just based on the stubbornness we've seen so far. He seems very much a man of, this is my philosophy. But at the same time, maybe he's finally been pushed to that. And, if he is one of these modern coaches, you've got to be able to adapt, regardless of how much managers do tend to stick to their principles, regardless of what happens. I mean, look at Russell Martin at Southampton, trying to play that style of football when you're getting absolutely hammered every week. I mean, absolutely hammered. I can't see him changing it, but at the same time, I would never have thought he would have changed it before the Scottish Cup final, and look how that turned out. So, as Graham Gibb mentions that right there, I would love nothing more for him to switch it up and for things to turn around, because it really would make me sad for these next 3 games to be the end of the road for it all, because I still think there could be something there. He just needs to be a bit more adaptable and a bit less stubborn, and maybe stop playing Dennis Nelson in the middle of the park as well. And I'm so fed up of it all. I just want it to turn around.
And Phil, Paul Donaldson's not joined the show tonight. He'll be watching on catch up later on, but he put in a comment before we came live about how his hope is that Saturday sees an end to zonal marking, let alone the 4-2-3-1 formation. Is it a feel of tactics and formation that needs changed? But interestingly, Callum wanted to see the end of Nielsen playing. Could, in terms of we need leaders, we need experience on the park, we almost be forced into seeing Nielsen and Shinnie, let alone Stuart Armstrong starting in that midfield, and then Kneuster and Nisbet as well on the park. And again, I wonder, with Thursday in mind, if we'll see Jack Milne potentially start.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, because I'm probably one of the first ones to come in and say that I'm not a fan of Nielsen that much in the midfield. But conversely, when him and Shinnie were on the park against Livy, was the only time I actually thought we didn't look like we were going to concede a really daft goal, which was interesting. But yeah, the zonal marking for one is, as you know, my pet peeve, so that can go in the bin. I agree with Paul on that one. The 4-2-3-1, again, so a lot of mention of it on Twitter, and again, it's an interesting one, because I feel like formations are just kind of there in name only these days. Players are so multi-positional, and a 4-2-3-1's effectively just a 4-3-3, really. Which, you know, when you see people calling for a 4-3-3, it's you're doing effectively the same thing there. So unless he's switching to an out and out two strikers, then it just kind of all seems a bit null and void. And like I said, I don't think formation's going to help if nobody can ping a 5-yard pass to who they want to. So but something has to change. I agree with that sentiment that, you know, I think somebody put in earlier, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. So something really has to change. What that change will be, again, we need to roll out Jimmy's tombola from back in the day of starting lineups and see what comes out on Saturday.
Yeah, and as Sam Gordon pointed out, the mark of any good manager is adaptability. Try those different things, especially when it's obvious the plan A isn't working. Jimmy doesn't seem willing to do this. So is he a good manager? Well, I don't know. He must be if he's won us the Scottish Cup with that squad and how we played last season. How much can we use that? A few of you are also then commenting on the fact that he used to play 4-3-3 in Sweden, now playing a 4-2-3-1 here. And I've seen a few people again on social media, not just in our comments tonight as well. Do any of you think he's being forced into this formation to play some of these players that he signed, or you not having that as
No.
not having that count?
Phil mentioned it earlier about, you know, if he's too involved. I don't think he's awfully involved anymore. I think he did step away when Burrows was appointed, and I watched some interview where he gave some American guy some podcast, and it certainly seems like he's now more involved in the financial side of things, and involved with the community trust as well. I don't think surely not. It would be insane if Davey from Garthy was, you know, forcing Jimmy Thelin with a rabbit to his head to play 4-2-3-1 with Sivert Nilsson and Graham Shinnie in there. That would be insane.
Yeah, and you know, with obviously the Leighton Clarkson being rested last night, Phil, do you expect maybe to see Leighton come into the starting lineup, or how many changes with then Shakhtar in mind could we see players rested ahead of that?
Yeah, I mean, I think we'll probably do the age-old Shakhtar as a free hit type thing. I feel like we have to go all out on Saturday. I think we need a win against Motherwell. I think if we lose against Shakhtar, no one's really going to lose their head when we're getting ripped apart by tricky favela kids. So, yeah, after the comments of Leighton being rested, you'd almost expect him to get played. You'd almost want him to get played at this point to kind of justify that comment, because if he gets rested again for Motherwell, it all just feels a bit pointless, really. But I can see there being quite a few changes. Shinnie probably back into the lineup, you'd imagine. For Nilsson, I feel like we're just going to have a rolling on and off of their legs over the next however many weekend to midweeks that we've got.
I'll be interested to see if Shinnie does play, because again, I saw talk about there being some form of fallout, and of course, you know, when there is poor form, that's when these talks seem to grow arms and legs. And if Shinnie isn't involved, you know, I highlighted his reaction to being subbed last time out against Livingston. You know, has he said something in terms of his frustration, and has that come to bite him? So, but as Brian O'Rourke says, you know, close to 20 games coming up between now and Hogmanay, on average 1 every 5 days. It's going to be big. It's going to be busy. Let's hope there's something positive to speak about soon, because it's really not fun and pretty. Constantly speaking about negative results and wondering what the future holds, not just for this football club, because I think I said last time out with Andy Skinner that surely we can't speak about relegation quite yet, but yeah, also the manager's future. I'm getting fed up of constantly speaking about that right now.
Yeah, I mean, if things don't get better and we've got a game every 5 days, think how much we're going to have to come on here and dissect it, and how miserable we're going to be just forcing ourselves to talk about this even more. Oh, so please just get better and stop being so useless, Aberdeen. Please, for the love of God.
Exactly. And as Robbie points out, we're in this mess before our real congested fixture schedule. Geez, that was a lot easier to say than I thought, or harder to say than I thought it would be. But yeah, as Callum, you said, we're going to have to come on here and speak about things, whether it's good, bad, pretty, or ugly. So thank you very much for grinning and bearing it with us. I hope you've enjoyed your Wednesday night therapy session, or Thursday if you couldn't bear joining us here live on the YouTube channel tonight, and you're catching up on an audio platform. Remember to follow us on your audio platforms of choice. Leave a like on the video, subscribe here on YouTube as well, because the content is going to keep on coming thick and fast through the good times and of course the bad times as well. Live reaction after the Motherwell game, Robert asks. Well, I'm not sure if either of you two are going down to it.
Thankfully not.
I'll be clearing my flat in Edinburgh, so I will not be there.
Callum's probably stocking the shelves in Tesco. I'll probably be too busy watching the Ryder Cup after being too disappointed. We'll see how bad it is. To be honest, if there's any news from the dugout, that might prompt a live reaction and I can jump on and do something. But until next week anyway, thank you very much to everybody that's tuned in here tonight on the YouTube channel and also tuned in wherever you've been listening or watching the podcast. Until next time, we'll see you then.